I'm Janet Camarina, Director for the Foundation Center San Francisco. It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's session on cultivating your fundraising team. Out of curiosity, is anybody here at a Foundation Center program for the first time? Great. Our plan is working. Sometimes we're too well kept of a secret. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about why those of you who raised your hands should consider this hopefully just the first of many visits to us. The Foundation Center's mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge about U.S. philanthropy as well as philanthropy around the world. If it's been a while since you visited us, you might want to come upstairs and explore what we have to offer in suite number 606, right on the 6th floor. We're not a membership organization. We're open, free to the public. And you'll see a full-service library and learning center upstairs, complete with about 22 public access computers that are chock full with databases designed to help you make the right partnerships in the philanthropic sector, including the Foundation Center's own, the Foundation Directory Online. And we provide the top-tier plan of that for free in our library. There's also Wi-Fi access if you prefer to bring your own laptops and access our database that way. We also offer training monthly to help you learn to use the databases we have in the library and special events like this one. And in terms of special events, I want to draw your attention to the fact that next month is Funding for Arts Month. So we have a number of arts-focused programs, including a Meet the Grantmaker session focusing on what's trending in the arts on October 29th, and a session on crowdfunding in the arts on the 21st, just to name a few of them. So be sure to check out our website at foundationcenter.org and at grantspace.org. Grantspace is the portal where we put all of the information on our classes and fund development and grant-seeking knowledge. So if you haven't checked that out, check it out at grantspace.org. And that is also eventually where highlights of the recording of this session will live. And I do want to mention that we are streaming the session today and video recording it. So to capture the Q&A, later on you will get little cards to write your questions on so that they can be read into the mic so people don't just see talking heads without the voice. So just be aware to jot down questions as they occur to you and save them for the Q&A segment, and then be prepared to pass your questions to our staff who will collect them. So without further ado, I'm delighted now to introduce you to the designer and moderator of today's session, who will then introduce the panel. We all know that fundraising is a team effort, but sometimes the elements of building a successful team are not so obvious. So I'm delighted to welcome back to our stage our Foundation Center San Francisco Advisory Board Chair, friend, and honorary faculty member, Lisa Hoffman, to help guide us through the secrets of successful team building. Please help me in welcoming Lisa.
Good morning. It's good to see you all. I actually know quite a few of you pretty well, so it's nice. I feel like I'm having a brunch without the food or the coffee or anything, but it's a good feeling. I'm going to introduce our panel in a moment, but first I want to tell you my idea of what our time like is going to be, and then we'll see what it's really like. I will introduce the panel. I'll ask you a few questions about the groups you represent. You have the questions in front of you, and that is so you don't spend the whole time figuring out a question that I'm already planning to ask the panel later in the program. And we'll take a break, I don't know, in about 45 minutes or so, and that'll be your opportunity to give me your questions. And I doubt I'll be able to ask all of them, but I will attempt to choose the ones that are most representative of kind of the themes that are obvious from looking at everything you submit. And so that's what our time will be like. So I am so thrilled and delighted to introduce you to our panel this morning. I have had the privilege of working with all of them for actually many years now. So I know from my own experience and my observation that each of them really understands how to create and nourish an overachieving fundraising team. from leadership to when someone needs a chin up and when someone needs a bouquet of flowers, and the strategy and planning in between those various points. So to my immediate right is Jim McBride, who is Development Director at the AIDS Legal Referral Panel, and I'm going to be asking them to tell you a little bit about their organizations as part of the first question. And Jim is one of those professionals who is genuinely positive and enthusiastic and knows how to motivate people in a way that's real, not in a way that makes you roll your eyes because it's a little Pollyanna. And so what he is able to create and manifest and draw from his team never ceases to astonish me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And to Jim's right is his co-chair and a longtime volunteer, Michelle Roberts. And one of the things I really appreciate about Michelle is that she understands what it means to lead as both a board member, because every board member is a leader, and as co-chair. She is fearless in saying, this is our commitment and our responsibility to give generously and to raise money. And she's also someone who's game. So I do a fundraising training for ALRP every year, and she was the first person who raised her hand when I said, who will do a role play on asking for money? And I believe she secured $5,000 that night. To Michelle's right is Susan Corlett, who is Director of Development and Communications at Sustainable Conservation. And Susan is someone who brings so much heart to her management and her team building that people just melt and say, well, what can I do for you? What can I do for the team? While also having a really strategic mind and just a smart approach to fund development. And Susan, after 10 years of being at Sustainable Conservation, and let us note that the new general term of engagement for development director, I think, is like 18 months or less now. Maybe it's less now. And after raising $30 million over those 10 years, after building her team from 2 people to 8, Susan's last day is Friday, and she is going to seek new adventures and experiences, and might be snapped up as an associate by some overworked consultant who needs help. We'll see. DeAnna Dalton, to my far right, is Director of Advancement at MapLight.org. And she is in the midst of expanding her team, just made 2 hires for the development team. And one of the things I really love about working with DeAnna is that we'll meet. We have a yearly meeting, and we'll agree on a set of strategies and tactics. And I tell you, by the next week, they're implemented and raising money. And DeAnna is also someone, really like this whole panel, who brings an incredible amount of heart to everything that she does. So thank you, panelists, for being with us this morning. So we want to know a little bit about you. How many of you are board members? Raise your hand. Okay. Board chairs? Okay. And how many of you are executive directors? Development directors? How many of you are executive directors and development directors?
I noticed that.
You can see the first aid station after the program.
Clear.
And how many of you are program people who also do fundraising? Okay. And how many of you are wealthy donors looking for a nice nonprofit to be an angel of? And I want to get a sense of what kind of groups you represent. So how many of you are social services groups? Okay. social justice, animals, aw, education, arts, environment. What about spiritual groups? Okay. So if any of you are having trouble with your fundraising karma, we have people from San Francisco Zen Center, people from Sojourn Chaplaincy. We'll have a special fundraising karma station during the break where you can, get a little emergency aid. Did I forget any? Oh, youth groups? Okay. So there's one other thing we'd like to get a sense of, and that's the size of the groups that you're representing. So how many of you are with groups where your annual budget is $500,000 or less? How many of you are with groups that are $100,000 or less? And how many of you are with groups that are 500,000 to 999K? Okay. And what about $1 million to 249? Is that right? 2.49. Okay. 2.5 to just under 5 million. Okay. 5 million or higher. Okay. So there's a good assortment of sizes and types of groups, and there's a good number of groups that are 2.5 million or less, and most nonprofits in this country are actually $1 million or less, which a lot of people are not aware of. So, so I'm going to join the panel now. And the first thing I wanted to ask, which everybody knows now because you have the questions, is if each of you could tell us a little bit about your organization. So maybe we'll start with DeAnna just to make things interesting and work down this way.
So I'm with MapLight. We're over in Berkeley, and we're a nonpartisan, research-oriented nonprofit that shines a light on money and politics. So we have a data set of campaign contributions, a data set of legislative votes, and then we gather information about which companies and interest groups support and oppose bills so that we can find sort of money and vote correlations and get them out to the media and to the public. We were founded 9 years ago, and I've been there for about 5.5 years. When I started, we had a staff of 5, a development team of 1, me, and a budget of about $600,000. And as of today, we have a staff of about 20, a budget of $2.1 million, and our development team is expanding to 4 in 2 weeks. I'm very excited about that. So, we've come a long way. We get about 2/3 of our money each year from foundations and about 1/3 from donors. We don't have any kind of endowment and not a significant amount of earned income, so we need to raise our budget each year through fundraising. And because we've been growing so rapidly, each year we go into the year knowing where about 2/3 of our money is going to come from sort of recurring donors, and needing to work pretty hard to find that other third.
How big is your board?
We have a small but effective board of 6.
Thank you.
So sustainable conservation works in California. We really think California can thrive when we bring all the stakeholders to the table to work together to solve problems, and focusing on California's land, air, and water. And I started 10 years ago, and it was me and an assistant, and now there's 6 of us. And when I started, we raised about $1 million. Now we raise $5 million. We have I feel the same way. We have kind of a small but dedicated board of 13. And and kind of what we did is 2 years ago we launched a campaign. It was the first time I had done a campaign, and we were very dependent on foundation funding. So now out of the $5 million budget, it's more half and half individual giving, foundation giving, and a little bit of government.
Thank you.
Well, great. The AIDS Legal Referral Panel, one of the tenets, by the way, is the more prepared you are, the less work you have to do. So I'm going to kind of read from my notes to make this easy for me. Our mission is to help people with HIV and AIDS maintain or improve their health by resolving their legal issues. And we accomplish that mission through our staff of 8 attorneys, and we have a panel of nearly 700 volunteer attorneys who help us take cases. Last year we handled over 2,200 cases for almost 1,500 clients. We handle any type of legal issue that is civil. We don't do criminal. We were founded in 1983, so it's our 31st year of operation. I've been with the organization for 12 years now, and in that time we've doubled our operating budget in response to the fact that we have 50% more clients since I started 12 years ago then. At that time, a lot of it that has right now to do with housing. There are a lot of housing cases headed our way, as you might imagine. Our current operating budget is about $1.1 million. And half of that is non-government from a variety of sources, revenue channels, if you will.
Yeah, and our board, up until, I guess, earlier this year, we were a board of 25. We're now 30. All of the board members are attorneys, most of them at big firms. There's one board member, bless her, she's not an attorney. I don't know how she handles working with all of this, but it's a really fun board, and we get a lot of support from Jim as a development director.
Thank you. So the next question may seem a little bit obvious, but I am still astonished in this day and age, after at least I know what I've been saying for my whole career, that I'll meet with a new client or a potential new client and say, well, tell me about your fundraising team. And they'll say, we have a development director. And so I think it's pretty interesting to hear what various individuals' perception and idea about the fundraising team is. So I think I want to actually start with Jim this time and just tell us who's on your fundraising team, maybe just a few words about each role, and we're going to get more in depth. But it's sometimes surprising to me with a really expansive view who you can induce to be on your fundraising team. Why don't you use this, because I'm just asking questions.
Sure, that'd be great. So it's funny with our fundraising team, I'm the development director, and when we have new board members join our board, they come into our office for an orientation within the first couple of weeks. And part of that orientation, I share with them that I know you're supposed to be my boss, but I don't look at you that way. You're on my sales team now. And I really do believe that we as a group need to bring in the money to the organization. And that's the first thing I would share with you, especially if you're smaller, is to get that mentality in your organization of we are in this together, we are a team, and all of us need to make these numbers happen. It's not me personally bringing in X dollars by the end of the year, and that's why you have a lot of development director turnover in organizations. So our team consists of not only board members, but my executive director and I, even though I'm a one-person development shop at ALRP. We have our staff who understand their role in fundraising. They help with mailing parties, they help at events, they help identify major donor prospects, get solicit auction items, etc., even though they're attorneys doing very difficult work day to day. But they get that their efforts in helping us with fundraising enables us to keep the money coming in the door, and it directly affects their salaries and salary increases and bonuses as they might occur. We have an events committee and a major gifts committee, two development committees we identified, and we ask each board member to join one or the other, as well as we invite community members to join those two development committees. We have a grant writing consultant that helps with our grant writing, as my job has gotten a little bit more heavy, shall we say. And then we have a communications marketing consultant that helps me with a lot of social media and production work that I don't have time to get to. And we occasionally hire out other folks like Lisa to come in and help us do fundraising related trainings. So that to me is our team, and we really look at it that way and utilize the team in that way.
Would love, Michelle, to hear if you have anything to add, particularly about the board, but just the team in general from your perspective as board chair.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the team, when I came into ALRP, I was initially a panel attorney, and then I got involved in the board. And it was really difficult for me in the beginning with this idea of fundraising, because even though I'm a litigator and I'm demanding money from my clients, it's hard for you to ask. Doing the ask was really difficult for me. But when I came into ALRP, I felt that it was just everything was in place. It was really what I call the well-oiled machine. And the teams that they set up, I think, were really effective in just making sure that each major component of fundraising was addressed, and that there were like these leadership roles and positions, and you knew exactly what you were supposed to be doing and your responsibilities. And I think that's really important for people who, like me, board members who aren't, I don't do fundraising as my day-to-day job, although lately I've been doing it a lot for LRP. It is really important.
Sure. The roles that we have for our folks on our team, I'll just cover a couple of the main folks. For the board, their role is to do a variety of things. And when we first meet with them, when they're prospective candidates, we actually share with them that this is a fundraising board that's communicated while we're in the vetting process, if you will. They meet with our executive director and at least 2 board members in advance of joining the board, so that's made very clear. We have a contract that states a variety of fundraising related expectations that we have of them that we review. During that time, we expect them to make a personal donation to, we have kind of a give-get participate model where through their various efforts of helping us get sponsorships for our events, identify and solicit donations from individual major donors, and help out on events and auction items and other things, that their efforts will result in X minimum dollars of revenue being drawn into the organization. Having said that, we don't manage that very closely. It's kind of more of a loose construct for them to consider, so they're clear about what we're expecting. Then, as I mentioned, we have the 2 development committees. They join one into the other. They all need to assist with our annual reception and then volunteer during the course of the year as needed. For staff, I mentioned kind of the things that we have them do. They help out in a variety of ways and are part of the team. And then for volunteers, we have our panel attorneys that both Michelle and I have mentioned. A panel attorney is we recruit for folks to serve on the AIDS legal referral panel. These are folks who volunteer their time as attorneys in cases that our staff can't handle internally because they're too quick turnaround, or we're conflicted out, or we're just overwhelmed. We refer out to these volunteer attorneys. Some are one person law firms, others are the big firms downtown, so it's quite a range there. And those folks help out not only just by taking cases and enabling us to do the work of the organization, that's about 50% of the caseload, but they help out in all of the various fundraising ways that we present to them during the course of the year with events, et cetera. And then, of course, we recruit volunteers to help specifically for fundraising. We have event volunteers and office volunteers to help with fundraising administrative tasks and with event administrative tasks like coordinating the auction and things like that. So those are kind of the general roles.
Susan?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing is that counting me and my department, there's 8 of us, but I'm the director of development and communications. So under me, there's 5 fundraisers and then 2 communication staff. So today, when I say there's a department of 6, I'm just kind of not talking today about the communication side of the shop. So you heard both numbers, and I just wanted you to know why. So what I want to say is that I was an executive director, and when you're an executive director, you can't hear me? Thank you. Oh, okay, great. When I was an executive director, it was great because I had access to explicit leadership training, and the organization was willing to pay for a coach. I had a women's leadership coach, and I benefited tremendously personally and professionally. And then I went back from being an executive director to a director of development, and it seemed crazy to me that we don't invest in the leadership skills of the director of development. That is the nuttiest thing I've ever heard. And so I actually introduced, this is for you, if you're, I guess in any seat in this house, is Be a Student of Leadership. This is a terrific book. And recently, 2 years ago, we launched a campaign, and I used every concept in this book on leadership because I'm the conductor of the orchestra. And, I'm looking at these sections, and my whole job is to move the whole team forward, make sure everybody understands where we're going, getting us all together going there, and then noticing who's having trouble and kind of shoring up those places. And this idea that the director of development does the fundraising for the organization is just the nuttiest thing I've ever heard. And if somebody has the interest or energy to do that, good for them. But that, I don't think you're going to actually raise very much money. So the way I kind of played around last night with this analogy of an orchestra, and you can see from my point of view, and I do the same thing in an interview or when I meet board members, it's like, so, how are we going to involve you in our fundraising efforts? And how can I support you in doing that? So I'm the conductor. And then the string section, I know you guys are supposed to be the string, but go with me here. The string section to me is the board. And, there's a subgroup of the board that's my leadership committee for the campaign. And then we pull in volunteers who are not board members for this leadership committee. And then I'm grooming them to go onto the board as my philanthropists and my solicitors, right? And then, you all are, you didn't know this, but you're the woodwind section. And this is really, believe it or not, this is the rest of the staff. So, when I started, there were 16 staff. Now there's 29. And I know that especially program people, you have access to a lot of information about grants, government grants. I know, and I ask all of our staff to be donors. It's like we're all in this together. You see my point of view, right? We are really all in this together. You all are my brass section, and you are the ED, and it's. You can be a successful fundraiser without the support of the ED. I think it's not very fun. I think that's a hard road, and I think there's ways to make that relationship workable and successful for both parties. And then this is my percussion section, and you're the development staff. And to me, the development staff is beating the drum, right? Here's the plan. I'm going to support you in executing the plan. What do you need? Let's go, right? It's all that organizational structure so that somebody like Michelle can just step in and go and not have to worry about printing a letter or something like that. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's how I thought about it last night.
And we'll have rehearsal when this session is over.
Oh, and I just want to compliment you. You all make beautiful music.
DeAnna?
So we are really lucky, and I feel tremendously lucky to work for an organization where our ED really loves fundraising. He sees the value in it, and he likes to do it, and he's good at it, and he's willing to invest a lot of resources in sort of building and supporting our development team, and then also his own resources of spending the time going out and seeing people. And so he is, the money and politics expert who people want to talk to. He's sort of the face of our organization to our really key major donors and foundation folks. And so our goal in sort of the development team with regard to that is pretty much to make him as close as possible to point and shoot. So we do all of the prep work and the behind the scenes work and the strategizing so that he can spend as much of his development time as possible sort of being out there, talking to people, winning people over without having to sort of deal with the details. And so our development team, in terms of our development staff, there's myself. We have a development associate who's focused primarily on our foundations. We've just recently brought on Lisa's advice, a development associate who's focused on major gifts. And then our new development assistant is starting soon to sort of support the work of all of us. And so we do that behind the scenes work for Dan, and then support our board as well. Like I said, we have a very small but very effective board. We have a lot of interest because we're a sort of tech-oriented organization that's working for social welfare. A lot of interest here in sort of the Silicon Valley from sort of former techies who want to give back. And so our board members are a really fantastic source of sort of that strategic level knowledge, as well as really fantastic connectors for us. And most of our major donors have come in one way or another through our board. And we also have an organization where, again, because our ED really sees the value in fundraising, we've been able to really build a culture of fundraising through the organization. And so not just us on the development team, but our communication staff and our program staff really understand, we're not just the people over in the corner doing boring stuff. When new programs start, it's because we're able to bring in money to start them. And so they're very responsive to sort of getting us what we need in terms of executing projects and then sort of getting us the data back to report on them, and that's been terrific.
I have a follow-up question. I am guessing that there's one or two people here with groups where your non-development staff are maybe kind of see fundraising as just the development department's role, and maybe you even have an entrenched culture. So my question for you, and Michelle, I would ask you maybe to, do a little twist of reluctant board members, even though you're so clear about being a fundraising board. I'm sure that happens. What would be two suggestions you would give to an organization, a development director, ED, that's trying to change the culture or establish a culture of fundraising so that every board member becomes part of the team? So maybe we'll start with Jim again.
Sure. Well, I think the number one thing is communication. As I mentioned, we communicate before folks even come in, both board and to some degree at the staff level, that everyone in the organization is involved in fundraising. And so we try to establish that context right away before they're even part of the organization. And once they're in the organization, part of our brand, aside from our black and red and white, that my very gracious board coach just happened to wear today with me, is that we consider ourselves as the ALRP family. And we use that languaging verbally and to some degree in writing. And by having that construct of family, everybody feels like they're part of something, and we all need to make the family work. And everybody has their roles, and sometimes those roles overlap because we're small, and we ask everybody to do a little bit of everything. So we have that mentality, and that's created as a culture, and it's communicated quite a bit. The second aspect would be the nurturing part, which we'll be getting into shortly, and we have some specifics around how we do that. But we're really big on nurturing. It does have a lot to do with chocolate, I'll admit that. But it works for our group, especially because our ED, who's been there 16 years, is a chocoholic and sets the bar for that for everyone else. So it's really just getting folks. When we see folks that are struggling, we do our best to support what they're doing. At a staff level, we have our executive director will work with individual staff members to help versus my doing that. And because, again, pretty much everyone reports to him, we have a very open structure in our staff. At the board level, as I mentioned, we have 2 development committees we created when our board started getting bigger, and we wanted to eliminate that soccer ball mentality where we had a task and the entire board's running after the ball. So we split it up at least into 2 areas of events and major gifts. We asked folks to join one of those 2 based on what their interest is, what their skill set is, what their comfort level is. So hopefully they'll be a little bit more engaged in those types of fundraising activities by letting them select that. And then what we largely do is we assign the people on those 2 committees to people on the other committee, the one person for the year. And they will, part of their job on the committee is to help that other person they're assigned to on the other committee with their tasks that are related to their committee. So it's a buddy system / peer pressure system, because they get enough communication from me and my ED. So having another board member, and occasionally if they're really not doing anything, we have to get other people involved, like our board co-chairs, to try to nudge folks along more directly. So it's mostly the carrot and very occasionally the stick, but it really is more of a family approach, and I think the nurturing helps with that, along with the context that this is a family and a fundraising entity. We all have to help out.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of it, I think, is communication, expectations, and accountability. And when I'm meeting with prospective board members, we tell them, right off the bat, this is a very active fundraising board. You're going to be expected to, reach out to your contacts. Because we're a legal services provider, it makes sense for us, for most of the board members, to be attorneys who have access to the base that we're trying to fundraise from. And so, we expect them to kind of be the link to their firm, but also to increase our community with major donors and other volunteers to the organization. And so we stress that from the beginning, and we get a sense of whether or not the person's going to be comfortable assuming that kind of role, and if they are, then it's not really a board for them to serve. I think there are a number of boards that are not as active, and we make it clear that you have to be an active fundraising board. It was something that Jim implemented recently that I thought was really effective, at least for me. At these board meetings, so we had to bring in a certain number of major donors each year. So you have to. And if you didn't, your name was on this list at the board meeting. And so I get to the board meeting, and I'm like, I'm the co-chair, and so I'm running the board, and I go, oh, my name is on this list. That is not okay. And sure enough, I secured a major donor the next day because my name was going to be taken off that list for the next meeting. So I think that was really effective.
I will share with you, it took me 11 years to get my ED to allow me to do that. It's only because we're a little behind in our major donor campaign, and we still have time to reach the goal, but we needed a little extra effort, and he finally allowed me to use that kind of peer pressure approach. But we rarely do that, but apparently it's very effective because we've gotten at 4 actually from 9 days ago. We've gotten 4 major gifts in since then, so it's going to become a new part of our ongoing construct at ALRP. But anyway, you do what you have to do sometimes, and it was done in a very loving way. And because Michelle was on that list and she was reading the list, it made it like a little bit more palatable for other folks to be on there.
Take one for the team, right?
There you go.
Susan, engaging reluctant staff?
Where my mind goes is we do a lot of grant writing. Over half our budget is from grants, and it turns out that to write the grant and to write the report takes the whole program staff in one way or another. And so from a development point of view, it becomes clear very quickly who thinks that's a good use of their time and who doesn't on the program staff. And so then I'm so sorry, but forever you are my ED brass section. And so then, from my experience as the director of development, the ED has to prioritize the fundraising, the grant writing responsibilities of the staff. And what I like is when, say you're a program person, I build a relationship with you, we work on a grant proposal, and you bring in $40,000. And then you see how your program is either financially strengthened or can grow, and we start building a really meaningful partnership. And with the backing of the ED, when I have a deadline for a first draft of a grant report, all of a sudden I'm getting it the day before. Rather than, because none of us likes to be a nag. And so, it's having that positive. And then every now and then especially as the director of development, I have to say, can we talk? Because tell me more about your world and the deadlines in your world, and can I tell you more about my world and the deadlines in my world? And it doesn't seem like a big deal to you to be a day late. But then I have this domino effect in my foundation proposals and grant writing that can be quite serious and have very serious implications for the bottom line of the organization. And once we, in a real positive way, get that relationship going, it works. And thank you for being such a good sport.
Especially as our organization has grown so rapidly, we've gotten very intentional about how we communicate with staff in terms of being really open and transparent about what's going on in fundraising, how money comes in, how we decide which projects to fund. So, we send out announcements about, new grants at the end of the week, but we also have, so it's sort of fun, a little gong by my desk. And every time money comes in, we ring the gong. And then people will, exactly like that, pop over from all over the office and be like, oh, what was it? Is it $5,000 from an individual, or do we get that $500,000 grant from that foundation? And so there's sort of a constant reminder of our money coming in. We also offer opportunities for sort of our program staff to be more involved with sort of that, especially again, 2/3 of our money comes in from foundations. So the foundations are really key here. And I think that program staff really tend to see the difference between when they're involved in sort of shaping a new project proposal and when we sort of drop a new proposal on their lap and say, by the way, we got money for it, do all this in 12 months. They're much happier with the first one as well. And so the difference between that keeps them pretty engaged, and, they have a vested interest in sort of keeping track of what's happening and contributing to it. And we, in sort of the name of that openness, we post all of our grant proposals on sort of an internal wiki where everybody can see them. We want to make sure that people can know as much about what's going on as they want to, and they don't feel like it's something that happens in another closed room and they only get, an update every quarter.
Just one last thing to add with regard to board member reluctance. I like to keep in mind, too, that there's a general formula with board member effectiveness as fundraisers or even just as board members, where you'll get 25% of your board does the bare minimum, 50% does a little bit more than that, and 25%, like Michelle, are superstars. And so you need to keep that in perspective, that you can't get all of your board members to be superstar fundraisers. Having said that, as long as the bottom 25%, as long as they're doing the minimum from that contract we talked about, they're making a financial contribution, attending board meetings, serving on one of those two committees, and helping out with sponsorships for our event, and identifying and soliciting some major gifts. As long as they're doing the minimum, that's fine. And there are occasions where we've had to get our executive director and one of our board co-chairs to have a conversation, ask someone to give up their seat so we can get someone in there who can fill that seat, because we really rely on those 30 people to help us bring the money in.
I wanted to make a couple of comments before we move on in our discussion, which is the theme of communication and leadership and accountability really strikes me in our discussion so far. And from my perspective of working with such a large variety and size and type of group, I noticed the relationship between the executive director and the leadership prioritizing fundraising and also creating a culture of philanthropy and fundraising at an organization. And that part of that leadership and support is supporting the time it takes. Because I think everything each of our panelists have described so far, probably some of you are thinking, well, how do you have that much time to talk with staff and sit down with them and say, tell me about your world, I'll tell you about mine. But from my perspective, when that doesn't happen, it's that classic situation of I don't have time to plan, so I'm just going to do this project. And then you end up having messes to clean up and fires to put out, and it takes a lot more time on the middle and back end. So what I observe is that the time committed to communication, which is really team building, saves time, but it's like the difference between the important and the urgent. It's hard to carve out that time, and then it becomes urgent and takes a lot more time. So that's just my perspective. And the only other thing I want to say around accountability is I often see such fear, like, well, our board is volunteers and our staff works so hard and we can't, have such robust expectations and then actually hold them to those expectations. But I find that people will live up or down to one's expectations, and generally there is a feeling of team camaraderie that opens up when, as a team, expectations are clear and they're met. So I think that's a good segue into my next question. I think you've created a pretty clear picture of how you've built your teams. So I would ask, do you have anything you'd add? And then would love to hear more, in addition to chocolate, about what you do to keep your fundraising team nourished and effective and engaged, and maybe your 3 top little tricks of the trade. And whoever wants to start can start.
I'll start. So first of all, when someone comes on, I'm talking here about our staff, we invest a lot of time early on in sort of setting them up for success. And so in the first week, we spend I don't know how many hours sort of sitting down and talking through lots of stuff. But basically all those articles that fly around about how to manage up, that say like, figure out how your boss wants to be communicated with, figure out what their top priorities are, figure out, what they're worried about. We have conversations about those in the first week where I tell them all those things about me so that they don't have to figure it out. So I talk about, here's the best way to communicate with me and our ED. Here's what, our most pressing goals in development are. Here's what success looks like for you at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. Here are my expectations around, when to trade off accuracy versus speed. Here are, what I want you to do if you get totally swamped or when you make a mistake. And I think people feel more confident sort of racing off on their own when they have all of that all ironed out. Another thing that we do and that we've gotten better with over time that I think really helps with our staff's motivation and sort of energy level is we really do try to keep to a 40 to 45 hour a week workload, which especially when we were sort of a one-person staff felt almost unachievable, like we have way too much to do, that's never going to be possible. And now that we've done it, I don't think that we get any less done in 40 hours a week than we were trying to get done in 50 or 60 because energy levels, motivation levels, and work quality just drops off so much. And so from my perspective, if I have people on my team who are routinely working 50 or 60 hours a week, there's something that I'm doing wrong as a manager. There's something wrong with our staffing, or there's something wrong with the expectations that I've set for them. And so, we've grown our team as we've grown as an organization so that we're not just putting more work on more people. And one of the things that our rapid growth has also allowed us to do that we've been very lucky to do is that because we've been adding about a staff person every year and a half or so to our team, we've by and large been able to sort of promote people internally to the things that they're really, really good at. And that's been tremendous for us in terms of having really talented people.
Okay. So I actually wrote it out. And sorry to read it to you, but just so you know, my favorite thing to do in the whole world is to go on a 4 or 5 day river rafting trip. So that's my analogy. I'm big on analogies. So my thing is navigating the whitewater. So here's how I think about the pace of work for a development team. We're all in a river raft on the Salmon River. In the old days, I've been doing this a long time. In the old days, we would have 2 or 3 months of being in the whitewater. If you've ever can imagine that, or you've been in whitewater on a river, it's very intense. Working as fast and furiously as we could to keep up with the current and the workload. And then it would slow down for several months, and we'd bail the water out of the raft, do repairs, and take a nap. But not today. These days, my team is always in the whitewater. I see nods. It's really hard when you're always in the whitewater. We're bailing as fast as we can and using our finely tuned river rafting skills to pull the poor person who got ejected from the boat. For those of you who have river rafted, every now and then you hit a rock and you go, woo, splash, and pull them back into the boat. The whitewater is fast, exciting, overwhelming, and exhausting. So 2 years ago, I made up an activity I call Navigating the Whitewater. Because if we are always in the whitewater, we're going to burn out. So we are going to pull our boat over to the side of the river once a week for half an hour and be in an eddy. And for those of you who have ever been on a river, there's these little places where the water's really calm, even though there's white water right next to it. An eddy is a quiet place on the side of the river where there's no current. The goal of our Navigating the Whitewater exercises is to recharge our batteries and reconnect as people in a hectic workplace. And the activities we have done, this is kind of in the order of my preference. One time we actually went over to a team member's house, and she's a violinist, and she played the violin for us. It was profound. 2 team members who are introverts did a training on the book Quiet for those of you who know it, and helped us understand, and I'm an extrovert, so I actually changed my leadership style, helped us understand the world through the eyes of introverts as well as extroverts. We created a team value statement that is posted over by everybody's desk. Every January, we create our New Year's resolutions for how to work smarter, not harder, and those are posted over everybody's desk. We really try to live by them. We share the latest in fundraising trends. Sometimes a report comes out and it's like doing a book report or something. And then we read books together. We've read The Leadership Challenge together. We read Daring Greatly together, for those of you who know it, by Brene Brown. And then we, different people take different chapters to talk about. And everyone on the team agrees that when you don't think you have time for navigating the whitewater is when you need it the most and receive the greatest benefit. It's increased teamwork and reduced stress. And what I like about it is I introduced it 2 years ago, and I ran it for about a month, and I don't run it anymore. After about a month, the team runs it. It's not mine anymore. It's the team's. And we create ideas, and then different people lead it. And we do it pretty regularly, once a week. We can't do it every week, but we do it almost every week.
So Michelle's going to speak in some detail about the nourishing aspect of what we do for board and staff. I wanted to jump in on a couple of things. I noticed that almost half the folks here, if not more, are at smaller agencies, sort of $1 million and under. So I'm going to address this more toward board members versus, because it sounds like you all are an ED and a development director, or you have no development staff, or et cetera. So we kind of geared our notes to that. And so one of the things that we do regarding building the team is we're fortunate in that we have this niche of the legal community. And so we kind of establish the expectation, parentheses, requirement that board members, when they leave, need to replace themselves from someone from their firm. So I don't know if you have a way to interpret that with your organizations or your situations, but if you can establish that expectation, that might be a way for everyone to have a little bit less stress trying to recruit folks. Similarly, for staff, we have a lot of volunteer law clerks who come through our office, especially in the summertime when people from the East Coast want to be in San Francisco for the summer for their internships. And these are unpaid. And so we get to know folks that way, or even from the area. And more than half of our staff are currently former law clerks, volunteer law clerks. So we had a chance to vet them, and they us. They know the work. They know how hard it is. They know how little they're going to get paid and whatnot. But the biggest thing I wanted to share to you is that I keep mentioning this concept of the ALRP family, and it's really important to us that people get a sense of what that is over time, and not too long a time, and that they feel a part of it. And we do the things on the board and at staff that kind of display that. One of the things, for example, is when I first started with the organization, there were a couple of staff members who were very unhappy at the time, and they were kind of cancerous, to be honest with you. And we fortunately lost 40% of our operating budget overnight. And you were wondering why I said fortunately. It was because it was a shock to the Bay Area and to our organization. However, it was an opportunity, silver lining for us to make some changes at the staff level. And from that point forward, our executive director realized that he needs to be hiring people not just for their skill set and bringing in board members, not just for what they could bring to the board, and bringing in volunteers not just because we needed hands and help, but are those folks going to fit in with our small group in each of those levels, and are they going to be kind of in our ALRP family, brand and context? And so that's a consciousness that if you have that, it can really help you grow that sense of we're all together and making that happen. So I just wanted to share a few of those items. Michelle, you want to jump into a few more specifics?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of identified, or Jim identified, and I'll elaborate on 3 key factors for nourishing the team. The first is, providing the necessary resources and support. If there is a template, a draft or sample, Jim's got it for every type of solicitation. I mean, we are soliciting throughout the year for various different things. In the beginning of the year, it's our big annual fall reception, and so there's a lot of solicitation we need to do to the major law firms to get them to sponsor the event, and also getting auction donations. And then kind of concurrently with that, or towards the end, we start our major donor campaign, and there's a whole new set of templates and materials for that. And it's really helpful to have that as a board member, because, especially when I'm making these phone calls to people people I'm trying to get to donate money, I'm doing it during my workday. I don't have a lot of time to sit there and type out something that has already been done, and he makes it very easy to do that. It cuts the time down significantly, so it's easy to, I have a 10-minute break, I'm, making a phone call, sending an email, and I wouldn't be able to do that. It would feel kind of overwhelming to have to put aside, 4 hours to do, a bunch of solicitations if those materials weren't available. There's also a lot of training opportunities, which I think was really important, and Lisa, you were involved in that, and ALRP offers that, I think, pretty early on in the year. And it was really important, for me when I talked about, the fear of doing the ask. I had no problem, if you asked me for money, I would write you the check, but then to go to somebody and say, can you give this organization money? It's a great organization. And that was really helpful. And I think I got over a lot of fears of doing the ask and hearing the no or getting ignored. Now it's fine, I'll ask away and, I get ignored, it's fine. And so in addition to the training opportunities, they have a board orientation in the meeting where the new board members get to spend time with the executive director and the development director and our volunteer coordinator, and we get information about the organization. A lot of times board members, know of our organization, but not, too in depth, and so this is an opportunity to really learn about the organization and why we need to do the fundraising. And there are a lot of times you have questions that you might be a little embarrassed to ask at the board meeting, and so it's an opportunity to kind of in a more intimate setting and not feel, like you can ask like the stupid question about like, so we're doing, an auction solicitation and what's the major donor, and for a while I had a hard time understanding that these were two separate campaigns, and so that was really good. Again, so we have a number of board members who've served for, several years and some who are really new, and we mentor each other and we provide opportunities to maybe kind of jointly approach solicitations to kind of help the newer, more junior board members get involved and be more comfortable with the process. And, Jim and the office manager, they're always available to help. And so if I'm, making a bunch of calls and I've, told somebody who said they were going to donate something, okay, great, I'm going to send you another letter because you lost the solicitation form, it's in the recycling bin or something. I'm going to get that out. Instead of me doing that or asking my support staff at, a busy law firm to do that, I called Jim and say, can you get this letter out to them? I called and, the donation's coming in, and he gets on that right away. And so having that support, I think, is critical. And another thing that I think is really important is that, they really recognize, and when he says, this isn't a family, it's true. Sometimes, we have responsibilities and we sign up for them, but sometimes life gets in the way, work gets in the way, and we're not able to make the 10 calls we need to make that week to whoever, we're reaching out to, and they make it feel perfectly fine to say, instead of lying and say you did it, to going to them and saying, I'm really sorry, I'm busy this week, I can't make those calls, and they don't give you a hard time about it, they reassign, they're really understanding, and that's been really great.
We have attorneys who are going. We have attorneys who are going into a trial, and so they may disappear for 4 to 6 months. And so they communicate that, we shift their work, they come back at the end and serve for several more years. You just got to really know your people and check in with them, as Susan, I think, was saying, kind of know who's needing the support and make it easier for them to do what they have to do and still be part of the family. So sometimes you get busy in other ways. It's all good.
Right. And then the other key factor, acknowledgement. I think that's really important. ALRP does a really good job of acknowledging all the work that the board members do and the development committee leaders do. That includes, and you could probably talk more about this, but just recognition at the board meetings when someone's brought in a major donor, they get recognized for doing that, not just recognized for not bringing it in. And let me see. So recently, I think a couple years ago, they did a spotlight article on me, which I really appreciated because I am a panel attorney, and a lot of my client base are also, ALRP clients, and so to have that spotlight article was really meaningful, and it really kind of solidified my tie to the organization to feel really recognized positively in that way. And is the calendar a secret? No. Okay, so one of the more recent.
Way to go, Michelle.
Sorry. So there's going to be an ALRP calendar. First time as a little thank you gift to the major donors, and they're kind of spotlighting very clients or panel attorneys or other important contributors to the organization, and they asked if I could be in the calendar, and I was like, that's great. That's So that made me want to call and get more major donors for them. And you probably, there's more on the acknowledgement end that you could probably talk
Well,
about.
an example of acknowledging people that are on your team, like today, Michelle is taking her entire morning to come and help me be with Lisa and the other panelists to do this. So an example of that would be, oh, I don't know, there's something back here. What is this? Oh, wow. Look, a bouquet of beautiful flowers. Is that for you? And wait, what's in here? Oh, wow, truffles. Who doesn't like chocolate? Oh, there's some, wait, a $20 bill. There you go.
Which I'm going to donate back to the organization.
I will, as I mentioned, our ED is really big on chocolate, so I'm now a chocoholic with him. But Bill Hirsch, our ED, and I, we're really in tune with our ALRP family members, staff, and board members, and literally their families and what's going on in their lives. And we're big on sending flowers to the hospital, or there's a new baby, or a wedding, or really staying on top of that and cultivating our relationships with these individuals who are our sales team in a very, very personal way. And it really does go a long way, I think. And makes a really big difference. We bring a lot of food to events. We have opportunities, social opportunities throughout the year for board members. We set up happy hours downtown where all the law firms are, so it makes it easy for them to pop over for an hour, and then they go back to work for 4 more hours. And it's amazing. And we do an annual dinner for the executive folks, the 4 officers. My boss and his partner put on this dinner for the executive committee and their partners, and my partner and I go to that as well, right at the beginning of the year when the board transitions, and it's a way for the board to get to know each other as human beings, and then we all now are going to be working together for the rest of the year, and he does it out of his own pocket and from his heart. We do a summertime retreat with board and or staff that helps with that family feeling and folks getting to know each other and spending time. Sometimes there's a program aspect, other times it's really just socially involved, and so we're constantly looking for ways to gel the team. When we have board meetings, we bring cookies and things like that to entice people to come instead of calling in. If they're leftover cookies, they go to the office the next day. Our staff can't wait till Wednesday mornings after board meetings now because they're leftover cookies. We do birthdays in the office for folks. We have occasionally every month or two we just bring in food on a Friday for no reason. And these small things really make a huge difference to this family concept that I'm talking about, to help with the staff and the board, really be engaged and be involved in helping the organization move forward, especially from a fundraising standpoint.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, that was kind of the third factor of the having fun aspect of this. We have an AIDS Walk team, for instance, and one of the things I think we started a couple years ago, if not more, was just incentives for people to fundraise. And it's one of the easiest ways to raise money because it's an easy ask. And so we had various prizes for who raised the most money, who raised $1,000 first, so that people aren't waiting until the last minute to send their email out and to get donors, and who has the most donors. So even if you have 100 people and each giving $10, at least you would be recognized in that way. And also offering ALRP wine for folks who stepped up to chair committees, which is really enticing, especially for lawyers who
we started selling private label wine through a vendor. My last name's McBride. Need I say more?
Yeah, and one of the other I guess the fun aspects, I don't know that you mentioned this, but we really have fun at these board meetings. We joke around a lot. I feel like I look forward to going to them. I've developed friendships with people, and I wanted to stay on the board just to have that interaction with them, with people that I would otherwise not be able to see. And one example in terms of the wine, I was just thinking you brought me these flowers, is there was a board meeting right before Valentine's Day, and I was complaining about how I'm not going to have anything for Valentine's Day and whatever, and then I was surprised on Valentine's Day to get an ALRP wine basket delivered to my house from one of my co-board members who was there, and so it was a great way. So he raised money for ALRP, he bought wine, and then he just made my day. It was great. So it's those kind of I think when you set up an environment where those relationships can foster and develop, it really supports people just wanting to stay involved and to fundraise.
Thank you. Yeah. So I have just one more main question, then we'll take a break. And I can see some of you writing out your questions already. Please write legibly. I think last time we did this, I had to sort of put 20% of the questions aside because I couldn't understand what people wrote. So I wanted to actually direct this towards Susan and Michelle, which is focusing on executive directors and then board chairs. Susan's worn both hats. What would you say executive directors, board chairs really need in the way of support and nourishment to be effective parts of the team, effective team members?
Do you want to go first?
Rochambeau.
I know, really.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Let me think about that. I think information and having that information really well organized is effective. Like, so I'm part of the executive committee, and I meet with the executive director by phone the week before a board meeting, and we kind of go over a lot of the issues, and he kind of lays out, he makes it very easy, for me to like run a meeting, for instance, and like sets it all out. And just kind of being in the know of like what's going on with all of the different moving parts, because we have a number of different teams, and where we kind of need to focus more effort. It's really useful information to have when we're trying to motivate and discuss what needs to be done with all of our board members.
I'll be honest, I think this is a hard question, and my experience as ED was that I was just slammed for time. And so even though I had been the director of development before, to prioritize the fundraising was really hard. So I just can't, now it's all just embedded in my head and I can't get it out. So that's why the percussion section is so important for the ED, so that I use that person's time extremely effectively. And it's almost turnkey. And now I feel the same way about the board. But I have to say, I think it's, in a certain way, it's even more, would you agree? I'm looking at Jim and DeAnna too. And then, then there is this just cultural truth that if the ED doesn't get it, how important their role is in the orchestra, that's a tough one. When I interview for a job, I make sure that's culturally already in place. If it's not, it's really hard to change. And then the other thing is I think, as the conductor, I think of the ED the same way I think of anybody, frankly, my other sections of staff, volunteer, or ED. And I think another resource I want to recommend is Kay Sprinkle Grace's book, Triple Way to Fundraising Success. So what she does is she gives a menu of ways a person can fundraise. This is for the board, but I think it applies. And, it's my responsibility to know who I'm meeting with and know the ways they're comfortable fundraising and build their confidence through things that comes to them naturally. So I just wrote down, because, you all are sophisticated and you know that, if 25% of people on the board or even 25% of EDs are comfortable making an ask, is all good. But so it doesn't matter if that's the strength. So I wrote down, maybe the ED, maybe they're great speakers, so I'm going to have you speak at a house party, or maybe I have you come with me to meet with a foundation officer. And you don't have to do the ask, I'll do the ask. Doing thank you calls. That's huge. For the ED to do thank you calls, or even just from the ED, appreciating the hard work of the development team and just valuing it and showing it in all these terrific ways Jim has talked about. That's huge. So, that partnership is going to look different depending on the person but that cultural piece, that they're a really big part of the success of the fundraising is, it's important. That's a given. And I don't care if the person has any experience doing it or not. We can work with that, but the time commitments are so extreme. There has to be a commitment.
Thank you. So we're going to wind up this section of our time together on 2 points. One is, do you have anything else to add? Because I think you've talked a lot about what staff needs, development staff in particular, to be successful, to be members of the team. And we don't want to forget our poor development directors. What do development directors need? So I'll just open it up, whatever you want to add to either or both of those questions.
One thing that you had originally asked about, which I guess I'll bring up now as sort of resources that may be helpful. One of the things that was personally most helpful for me as I was sort of growing into my development director role was the AFP's Mentor Match program, where in the spring people can apply to be a mentor or a mentee or both, and then get hooked up with people who have similar types of experience who are willing to sort of work with them for a year. And I did that, I think I started 3 or 4 years ago. It's a 1-year program. I'm still in touch with my mentor every month. We email every week. We talk by phone every month. She's back on the East Coast now. And it's been really amazing, even as I've become a lot more confident having someone outside the organization who I can sort of bounce ideas off and get support from when things are tough and sort of ask questions about, who isn't my ED or my staff person or my board member. So I highly recommend that to everyone, no matter sort of what level you're at. Whether it's sort of a specifically mentoring relationship or just sort of having external support.
Go ahead.
So I'm really glad you said that. So I'm on the board of AFP. And I'm supposed to encourage everybody to join AFP. So I think that's a great idea. Don't be laughing over there. And one of the, there's lots of, I love AFP because, it's my people. And fundraisers, I don't know what it is about us, but we're really fun and good people to hang out with. And, if you want to talk about how to get on the board, come talk to me. I love it. And then this informal networking happens where I just pick up the phone because I know you through the board, and I just say, I'm trying to do a direct mail, talk to me. I don't know how to do this or whatever. And then define AFP. So, okay. Can you see why I write everything out? Okay. So it's the Association of Fundraising Professionals. There's 2 great groups. So these are great resources, so I'll throw it out. There's DER, which is Development Executives Roundtable, and it's cheaper. I didn't say that as the AFP board member. And then there's Association of Fundraising Professionals, and they both have classes, and it's a great way to network and learn a lot. And I think they're both fantastic, and I've been a member of both. And then the other thing I just want to say about AFP is they've started this thing where once a month you go out for drinks with colleagues, and you can get on that mailing list. Let me know if you want to be on it, whether you're a member or not. And it's, there's just nothing like, as far as care and feeding for the Director of Development, there's just nothing like talking to a colleague. There's just nothing like it. Like, oh my God, they want to do another golf tournament. And that knowing look, and so I guess that colleagues, I guess that would be my biggest recommendation.
For me as a development director, I think it's that my ED really involves me in the organization at a director level, particularly when it comes to setting goals and particularly when it comes to setting the agency's operating budget and therefore my fundraising goals. So I participate in that actively and then wind up having ownership of that number moving forward. So that's a really important thing. And then he follows it up by giving me a lot a lot of autonomy to make that happen with our sales team. And in fact, he does that to most of our staff. A lot of us are in our own silos. There's an immigration attorney and an outreach attorney. We all have like our own little fiefdoms, except for the housing department, which is the majority of our clients. So it's great to have that autonomy. So if you can provide that for folks and feel supported, I think that's a big part of it. And then lastly, every once in a while, just throwing your development director a bone of some sort. For me, it has to do with technology. Poor Bill, I have to say it, Michelle. My boss is a technophobe / Luddite, and he literally does not own a cell phone to this day. And but he's the best fundraiser in the world, so I'm not complaining. It's just he walks by the copier and it breaks down. I am not exaggerating. And so. I'm trying to drive the organization. We have attorneys who have had crackberries for 20 years. They're like the early adopters. And so I've been fighting Bill on technology and getting things in there. And every once in a while, he'll let me pull something in that is technology driven that can help me and us do our job better, even though he has no clue what it is and has no thoughts whatsoever about its possible success, despite what I present to him. So I think occasional bone.
Thank you. So take a little break, come back at 11:30. Give me your questions. If you want to direct a question to a particular panelist, just write their name at the top of the card. And when you hear the bell, either we'll begin or you'll be enlightened, or both. So the first question I want to take up was directed towards Susan, but I actually want to expand it to the whole group. I think it's a really important question because of how essential leadership is to both effective fundraising and a really thriving fundraising team. So the question is specifically for Susan. How can you share more insight on how you spend your time as a leader in the director of development role versus frontline fundraiser? So I wanted to ask that of DeAnna and Jim as well, and then see if Michelle has any thoughts about that question too in relationship to the development director's leadership role and how that impacts the board. Don't ask me to repeat the question. I don't think I could.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to go
You can
first?
do it. Yeah, you can do it.
An anecdote. Come on, you can do it.
Yeah, so the question is, how does my leadership get expressed in the organization in ways beyond just fundraising?
And how much time you spend in that leadership role as opposed to technical frontline fundraising. But I think both parts are really important.
That is a great question. So it's so interesting because I was just saying, kind of walking back from the bathroom, one of the reasons I shifted from being executive director back to the director of development is because I love fundraising. And when I get too far from that kind of frontline action, it's I think strategy is important. I think management's important, all that. But I like fundraising. I just think it's fun. And so the honest answer to the question is I'm always trying to carve out more time for the actual going to the foundation meeting, following up with the person from the event so that, I get to know them and can ultimately do an ask. And so it's a really insightful question because it's a balancing act between keeping my hand in the game, because that's what really energizes me, and conducting the orchestra. And so if I was going to put a percentage, I think the truth is, it's probably about 20, maybe 25% kind of the direct fundraising, and the rest is really conducting.
I think as I'm trying to put percentages on that, I'm grappling a little bit with like what time I would carve out as like the time I spend doing leadership, because I think that it's easier for me to say, well, this is how much time I spend doing strategic planning, and here how much time I spend doing management, And here's how much time I spend doing fundraising. And leadership is something I do through all of those things. It's part of everything I do. But while I like fundraising, I also really like I like the management part. I like working with my people and helping them get whatever resources they need to feel really successful at what they're doing. I'd say I probably spend about 25% of my time doing stuff at like the strategic level in terms of sort of planning and looking ahead, and then maybe half of the rest of my time doing direct fundraising and half sort of working with the people on my team to sort of support their efforts. And we have some newer people on our team too, so it's been heavier recently, sort of getting them up to speed and having them know that I'm a resource for them. Anytime they need something, I'm going to be responsive. I'm going to really get them enough stuff up front and as they're working on their projects that they can build their skills there and then really sort of shoot out on their own.
I'm not sure how much more to add to that. It is all integrated as far as I'm concerned. I don't really see it as distinct tasks that I'm blocking out chunks of time for. It's just these are things that are happening over the course of days, weeks, and months of a year that need to get done, and so I don't really think of it that way. To me, it's all fundraising, and I don't even really think of it as leadership, to be honest with you. I think of it as coordinating and administrating, because I am willing to do a lot of the administrative support of the fundraising function for board and staff to keep things moving. We're small, and if I can make it easier for my board member to make 6 or 7 asks instead of 1 or 2 because I'm customizing the letter for the third time to the person who keeps throwing it in the trash, but we now have a live contact at that vendor or at that firm, I'm happy to do that, and to me that's worth it. So is that leadership because I'm helping the board member have success in securing that sponsorship ultimately, or is it administrative? Is it fun? I don't really think that way. In fact, I have a little confession to make. I actually hate fundraising. I do not. It's true. If I didn't have to do fundraising, I wouldn't do it. But I seem to have this natural skill set for it, and so it just makes sense for me to be doing it, as opposed to like being an artist or a performer or a singer or something. So that's just kind of how that goes. I will say what I do love that's fundraising related is when the mail comes in. My boss and I fight for the mail to open it up to see if there are checks in there or a grant came through, or getting that phone message that a major donor happened through a board email or something like that. So the bottom line, seeing those numbers occur during the course of the year is really what drives me. So I guess I don't really hate fundraising, but I wish I didn't have to do it. But somebody has to.
I just have nothing to add to that.
Please don't fire me.
No.
So we have a series of questions, and I'll just start with you, Michelle, about boards and kind of as part of the team, their essential role. And one of the themes that is kind of flows through a number of these questions is how to motivate underperforming board members or board members who are really scared about asking or who aren't interested in asking. How do you work effectively with them? How do you bring them into the team? How do you motivate them?
Right. Well, besides calling them out at board meetings for not meeting the goals, yeah. So Jim and Bill, our executive director, they always offer to us, for people who don't want to go out and do the in-person ask, to say, set up the meeting. Email, phone call, just say, would you like to meet with our, development director? They'll do the ask for you. And I think that's great because I've done that a number of times where I've said, you've really been supportive of the organization, can we take you out to lunch with the executive director? And if they want to avoid the in-person ask, then they'll send a check-in, after. But I think that that's really one way to do it. And Jim already mentioned this earlier, but I do think it's really effective, is not just, getting the same emails from, the directors of the organization, but having the peers call. I think that that's really effective because when I get a voicemail from so-and-so saying, have you made your calls? Okay, I got to make the calls because I can't show up to the next board meeting having not done that. And I think that that's really effective. And I think generally we don't really have much of a problem with people not following up, and maybe it's because we do a lot of that due diligence with people when they first join. So we usually get people who are fairly motivated or understand that there's like a very minimum level that you have to perform. But that's those I think some of the ways that have worked.
Anyone want to add? Any ideas?
I think that sort of some of the same principles that we apply to our donors can also apply to our board members. And so like sometimes we have an underperforming board member and we think, oh, they're an underperforming board member, so we don't ask for anything from them because we accept that they're an underperforming board member. And they're not going to just step up and start doing stuff if you don't ask them. So you have to figure out what the right ask is, and then you have to make it. And sometimes, sort of ramping up. I think Michelle's suggestions were really great about sort of less threatening openings, like, getting them to set up a coffee with the ED and themselves and the prospect. Once they're more engaged doing that, you can sort of build up from there. But if you just sort of wait for them to step up, you need to be driving that.
So I'm sure a couple of things to add. One of the things that we do for board members is if there's somebody that's underperforming, I try to assign them. First of all, we try to get them to find their own prospects for sponsorship and for individual major donor solicitations from their own, dating myself, Rolodex, and that way they're reaching out to people that they know. But if there aren't enough of those prospects or they need help with that, I try to assign them somebody who's really warm, if not really hot, so they have a really high chance of success to close, a solicitation for sponsorship or for an individual major gift. And then once they get that win under them, they start to feel a little more comfortable and get a little more momentum. Similarly, one thing we do is we're on a fiscal calendar, and so we ask all of our board members to communicate their annual board pledge by the end of January, so that for the rest of the year, we're in a position to state that 100% of our board contributes to the organization. And there are some donors and some foundations that kind of ask that question, wanting to see 100%. But the reason we do that is it enables them to say, will you join me in supporting the organization? Because they have already communicated their financial commitment, and it makes it a little bit easier when you're joining something than just asking them to do something. And so I think those are two things that come into play. And the third thing is we tend to budget conservatively, generally speaking, and it's kind of my personal style. It's one of the ways my boss acquiesces with me. And so that during the course of the year, we're usually at or ahead of schedule. So it gives the people that are involved in those tasks a sense of momentum, and that we're having some success, and they can help contribute to that and reach goals, versus setting really high goals, which is a very sound strategy for revenue generation. But for our organization, we choose not to go that route, and that way people are feeling like we're having momentum and it's going well, and therefore they can contribute to it.
Thank you. A couple of questions I think are related. One is about creating a culture of philanthropy, which is so essential to building a fundraising team, when the opposite kind of culture is already so entrenched. So I think there's more need for ideas and experiences about how to do that. And then related to that, and I encounter this quite often, is often board members don't want to reach out to their own networks. And I think there's usually a relationship between that and the culture around fundraising and philanthropy. So I just wanted to throw that to our esteemed panel. Tips for turning around that entrenched anti-culture of philanthropy attitude, and then maybe within that frame, if possible, I seem to be asking complicated questions during this portion, how to encourage, induce, inspire board members to reach out to your own networks. You won't build bridges and alienate friends and family. So let's see, DeAnna was nodding. Why don't we start with you?
I am probably not the ideal person to address the first half of that question, just because, like I said, I came into the organization with an ED who was enthusiastic about fundraising, an active board, and a culture in place. In terms of getting board members willing to reach out to their networks, I think that one thing that has been successful for us is that sometimes board members, if we ask them to, throw a house party or otherwise sort of reach out to a large group of people, and they've been a little bit hesitant to sort of make the ask right away. for us as an organization, we do money and politics work, and, we can sort of have a sort of soft intro where, maybe we have an event where we can see which of their contacts are interested in getting more involved without having an ask. So we have a house party. We talk about, a post-election debriefing. Here's the role of money in politics in the election. Most board members are really willing to invite their friends and contacts to a non-fundraising event. And then once they've come to the event and they can see which of their friends and contacts are actually really engaged about this issue, it doesn't feel like a cold ask for them to sort of move things along further. And if, they come and they're not engaged in the issue at all, then that's not somebody we want to pursue anyway. So that's something that's helpful for us, and has definitely helped our board members feel good about knowing that we're going to approach the right people sensitively and not just sort of, jump on them for money as soon as they walk through the door.
So on the first question, this frustrates me sometimes, but it's true, is that, I can try to change the culture from within, but often it's just really different to hire somebody like Lisa and have a consultant come and say the same damn thing, and then the board members go, now that's a good idea,
Sometimes I think I should sit next to a client and, it's like a puppeteer thing.
Oh my gosh. So thank you for letting me get that out. And
No problem.
and then on the other one, and Lisa can speak well to this, that there's a rule in fundraising that some people are very comfortable going to the people they know to ask for money, and some people would, that's not going to be comfortable, and so you give them donors and prospects they don't know, because that's going to be more in their comfort range. One thing I did 10 years ago that's continuing today is so this is my board over here. I'm just into this analogy. So I divided them into two groups, and they had a competition to see who could raise the most money from our highest dollar donors, not the people we met with individually in a major donor meeting, but not the low dollar donors anyway. And so staff, the fabulous percussion department, gave everybody letters, really nice letter, really nice package, and then a little monarch piece of paper so that you could, and then we divided up the donor list based on who knew who, or affinity or geographic, whatever made sense. And we said, write a personal note with a specific ask amount, and let's see who raises the most money. And there was a head on this group, and there was a head on this group. And both of the heads on the board said, I'm not competitive. No big deal. And then these two non-competitive people were like this, I made $50 more than you do. And all the people on the board who had told me I never go to my friends, about year 3, they added names of their friends to send these letters out to because of the competition. And it really, it kind of, I like telling that story because it's an example of making it accessible for people to do fundraising in a way that's comfortable, and then building their confidence. Because, to their great surprise, they raised a lot of money. And I have to say, that's back in the day when I started, when there were 2 of us on staff. We had 100 donors. And it was definitely my motto of, lemons into lemonade, of, a big organization can't send a $250 donor a note from a board member, but we can. And those people, the donors, they developed relationships with, to this day, like, oh, that's my donor. Oh, that's my board member. And it's very powerful, and we still do it. And it's important. Anyway.
So for the first question, creating a fundraising culture, ALRP had a mixed board when I first joined 12 years ago, meaning some folks really didn't want to do any fundraising, and others would do what was kind of a typical fundraising function for a board member. And about 3 years in, or 9 years ago, we had a couple of board co-chairs who were really interested in seeing the organization grow because federal funding for HIV and AIDS services like ours was starting to wane, and the client need continued to grow, and so they foresaw the future. And as a result of that, these co-chairs really pushed our ED out of his comfort zone of year in, year out service provision at a similar budget level, and helped us figure out how do we shift this organization to be able to meet the future need. And so a couple of things occurred there. We decided to move to a fundraising board model with this give, get, participate structure, and we were prepared then to implement that from the executive committee and the executive director into the organization, and we were prepared to lose half of our board in the course of a year or two as a result of the implementation of this shift. So we bit the bullet, and it turned out in hindsight to be the smartest thing we ever did, because the tide of people coming to us is higher than ever. And as I've mentioned, we've doubled the income stream of our organization because of that shift, and we have a great fundraising ED, a board that is a fundraising board, and a very strong team approach. And if we didn't have that, the organization would not still be here today. So for those of you out there, that's what happened with us. So for some of you, it may require your ED and your board co-chair having a coffee meeting to determine where do you really want this board to go, how do you really want to make it become more fundraising oriented, and it may involve some internal planning or pulling in an outside consultant like Lisa Hoffman to help with a strategic planning process over the course of 2 to 5 years to make that shift, because those kinds of shifts do not happen overnight. They take planning and time and implementation, and have repercussions to folks. So that would be my suggestion around those items. In terms of donors, I think it's helping folks to reach out to their people. They're either going to be comfortable with that or they're not. And so if they're not, we have folks that we can assign to them that we need help with, because I can't make all those calls. And so that's what we use our sales team for. But we will ask for their folks to come to various events and to volunteer and come to our major donor leadership event as a guest and get to know the organization, to join our AIDS Walk team and invite their friends and family that way to make $25 donations, to be with us on a corner at a street fair collecting donations, and all different kinds of ways from low to no cost to start getting involved in our organization and find out more why their friend or colleague or family member is on our board, and over time they start coming in, as I think was mentioned earlier. So it may take several years to cultivate the friend of the friend into a major donor role, and that's a very solid strategy as well.
Yeah, I guess there's one thing I could add in terms of reaching out to, or feeling comfortable reaching out to your network. A couple of things that I did recently that made me feel less hesitant about the ask was, I went to a different fundraiser and I won one of the door prizes. It was like a jam box or one of these little speaker things, and I Googled the value and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And so I reached out to my friend. I was like, if you become a major donor, I will give this to you. And and he was like, he's like, great, I'll and so that's how I got off that list at the meeting. And I had to edit his briefs for free, and it was all this, but it was fine. So that's how I got him. And then the other, we had this a contact who's not really a friend, but I guess in my he's an opposing counsel, he practices in the area of law, and so his firm has always sponsored the auction. And he came to us with a legal issue, wanted our advice. So my law partner and we just gave it to him for free, and we're like, we really appreciate how much you've supported ALRP, to kind of, so that when I ask next year, we pony up that he will go to whoever makes a decision in his organization and suggest that they keep it up. So give something to get something.
Thank you. I'm very sad to say that our time together is coming to a close. And I want to thank each of our panelists for a great conversation and your wealth of experience. And thanks to all of you. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. Couple of things. Keep your eyes open from an email from me about 2015 programs, which will be a little bit later this fall. And if you are not on my email list, which I use very sparingly, just give me your card. I'll put you on it. And have a fantastic day. Thank you.